I want to take a few minutes to walk you through this issue of Pilote magazine. This is from 1968. The magazine itself was founded in 1958, so you can see up here, this is July 25th, 1968 edition, the 10e année, so it's the 10th year of the magazine, I believe. Issue number 455. This came out weekly from 1958 through about 1974, so I think it was. Then it kind of rebooted into a monthly magazine. It was founded to be sort of the slightly older version of the Spirou and Tintin magazines of the day that were produced in Belgium. This one came out of offices in Paris, led by Rene Goscinny. And thus, Asterix was born, and that's why Asterix, you see, is still on the cover. They were the runaway hit, Asterix and Obelix, to the point where Le Journal d'Asterix et d'Obelix is on every cover as well in the late 60s. And we'll see an Asterix story in here along the way. The reason why this particular issue is so important or special, take your pick, you'll notice from the cover, if you think that's familiar, I'll show you the modern day album equivalent of it. This is Valerian and Laureline edition, the first volume. So this is the magazine where volume 1 of Valerian began. Now this is not like the super edition, collector's edition kind of thing. There was a Valerian story before this called Bad Dreams. It was only about 20 pages or so. It was a year or two earlier, I think. Mézières used a different art style. But we'll get to the City of Shifting Waters in a little bit. Let's just page through this thing and see what we've got here. We have an ad, of course, for Super Pocket Pilote. This is where they had a smaller version of the magazine, but they stacked it full of 260 pages of nothing but the comics, I believe. I'm not entirely sure on that. I have one of these coming. I just bought off eBay not that long ago, so I'll do a future video on that. Achille Talon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was really popular. I love the art on this. I love the lettering on it. It's classic big nose style cartooning. The funny thing with this is it always started on the first page and ended on the last page of the magazine. It wasn't at all confusing. But at least it told you at the bottom of the page, go to page 50 for the continuation. And over here, when it says, until the next issue, it says, that's a gag. It's not true. Go to page 50. This is Rubrique-a-Brac. This was a 2-page series originally titled Dingo Dossiers, which was written by Rene Goscinny, drawn by Gottlieb. Eventually, Goscinny got too busy with his Asterix work and Iznogoud and Lucky Luke, and so he gave this series over to Gottlieb, who retitled it Le Rubrique-a-Brac. And it's basically these 2-page humor strips talking about history and everyday life and all sorts of things. I haven't read too many of them yet. There are collections of both this book and the Dingo Dossiers. In fact, they just reprinted them in France about 15 years ago or so you might still be able to find them. Here we go. Here's the first 2-page full-color spectrum. These are the last 2 pages of Asterix at the Olympic Games. That's this book here, which you can see, by the way, just for size comparison, the magazine's a little bit taller and a little bit wider than the album, but then again, they also have this strip along the top where they have the title and a little behind the, or not behind the scenes, but previously on, I imagine that is, Asterix. And if we go to the last page, you can see, sure enough, colors look a little different. The paper obviously is a little more yellow here versus the white of the albums. I don't even think this is the remastered edition of the Olympic Games book from 2011, I believe, was the remasterings. But that's Asterix and the Olympic Games ended in this issue. And you can imagine the panic it sent the bean counters in when all of a sudden Asterix wasn't going to be in Pilote magazine for the next 6 or 8 or maybe 12 weeks until the next story began. But they had to figure out how to work that out, and they did it between volumes. They did it for a long time until Asterix went direct to album a few years later. Here's another strip they had, another sort of everyday life kind of thing. Lots of text pages and game pages in Pilote magazines. You have crossword puzzles. You have, here are 2 pictures. Tell us what the differences are, that kind of thing. Michel Tongai, Menace of the Dead of Tahiti or something. Charlier is the author of this one. Gige is the artist. Great artist. And then we have a complete story, which you usually ended up with 1 or 2 of these in every issue. It's, 6 pages, 8 pages, 10 pages, however long it is. And this is where I'm not sure exactly why this happened, but you have these black and white stories with spot coloring. in this case, you have this sort of two shades of pink and orange and whatnot as the story goes along. I haven't bothered translating all this. I imagine it wouldn't be that difficult to do. There's not that many words, and I can just tell by looking at them, they're all fairly common. This is probably written for a younger audience, you think? But the thing that I've always questioned, and I see this sometimes, it happens in the middle of stories where the pages go black and white with spot coloring all of a sudden. I'm guessing it was because of the weekly grind of the work and getting everything out on time. Sometimes they probably just didn't have the time to do full colors on it. Because some of the stuff that appears in this spot coloring manner here, when it got collected into an album form later, would have full colors. And here you can see they have different colors. They have an orange and a pink, and whatever that lion's color would be, brownish. Here is Valerian. This is the City of Shifting Waters, Volume 1, page 1 and 2. That's all they did. They just had the first 2 pages here to start. They didn't have, like today in Spirou magazine, when a new serial begins, often they'll have the first 4 or 6 or 8 pages just to get the story going. And then it's 2 pages from there on out. But here you can see there's a difference. They kept the colors pretty close. Obviously, printing styles have changed, and computerized printing made it a lot easier. But you can see the art looks pretty similar. It's a little more, it's funny, the newer version with the white paper, the colors look a little more faded. They're not as in your face as they were back then. But there's also some corrections here and there. I'm not going to go through every little detail, but there's some little changes and corrections along the way. But for the most part, it's the same coloring in the collected editions as you had in the original albums to begin with. The art is by Jean-Claude Mézières. Text is by Linus. That was the name Pierre Christin went by back in those days. The History of France in 80 gags, a single page gag page that would show up in every issue around this time. Here's your, find your way through the labyrinth, the maze as we like to call them. Here's another one of those black and white pieces. And then in the middle for the centerfold spread, and this happened in Spirou magazine, this happened in Pilote magazine a lot of the times, they were obsessed with either history or with cars and planes and trains, I guess. I haven't seen any train ones yet, but this one had this whole big feature on the Airbus, the Lockheed C-5A Galaxy plane. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's pretty impressive. That's a big plane, but just seems like a really weird thing to have in the middle of a comic book magazine. But this was probably aimed at sort of, what we would these days call tween-age boys. And so that probably worked for them. Barbe Rouge, this is a 2-pager, and this starts on here. You skip a couple pages and concludes here. You can't see it in this example. There are better examples of better issues I have to show it, but the pirates that star in this book are the pirates that the pirates in Asterix are patterned after. The pirates in Asterix are actually a spoof of the pirates in Barbe Rouge here. More text pages, some looks like cryptography information, a lot of cryptography stuff, some Shakespeare stuff. I'm sure it all makes sense. Little code about secret codes or something. Want to buy some Hot Wheels? Looks like Hot Wheels. This is Iznogoud, Rene Goscinny's series that he wrote and drew. Not drew, he only wrote it. Cinebook has the collected editions of these as well. I have not read any of them yet, but the cartooning is nice. All that hand lettering. God, I love that hand lettering. Especially when you get to the sort of the thicker, screaming things. You had that a lot with Albert Uderzo stuff here in Asterix. He worked a little extra because obviously he had a different font for when the Greeks are talking. And then he had these big bold letters for when people are screaming and that kind of stuff. But man, that hand lettering you just don't get anymore. And a lot of it looks along the same line of thought, the same school of lettering, very sort of blocky letters, but they had that handcrafted quality to it that made it look more organic than we have today. This is obviously a complete Iznogoud story. Goes on for a while. Here is one that I wish I could read and is not available in English, but has been translated in the past. This is Lieutenant Blueberry. Text by Charlier, drawn by Giraud, who is Jean Giraud, who of course is Moebius. This is the Blueberry material you hear about sometimes from superfans that we still have not gotten in English, even though the other Moebius libraries are being reprinted places. This stuff not coming out yet for whatever reason, I don't know, but hopefully someday we will get them. I mean, just beautiful work, really detailed stuff on here. Horses, lots of horses. Artists hate drawing horses, Jean Giraud had no problem with them. Here you can win a cruise to the south of France if you like. Take your pick with Club Mickey, Club Neptune. If you're into that kind of thing, you'd be the young reporter of 1968. Editorial page, I'm assuming some sort of short gags here. Here's Lucky Luke, which you may actually think of as being more of a Spirou title, and it was. It started over there in Spirou. It moved to Pilote in the 60s for a few years, then went back to Spirou, where it remains to this day, which is good because none of the other magazines exist these days besides Spirou. All the competition is pretty much gone, but it's just great art in here. And you can tell also the coloring you see in the albums today, which looks kind of weird and 60s-ish, that really was the original coloring with those flat colors in the backgrounds. There is a video elsewhere on YouTube that Hassan did for Strip Panel Naked where he goes over the coloring schemes of this. I'll have to link to that below in the show notes. They don't call them show notes on YouTube, though. And finally wrap up with some classified stuff. A note to the readers. Apparently they were having some issues delivering some issues of Pilote for a little while there. After the 16th of May, you know, I just realized... This is July 1968. They're talking about May of 1968. There's a famous event that happened in Paris in May of 68 where the city was in a bit of turmoil. I wonder if they had problems delivering issues of Pilote during that. They might have. There's Achille Talon again. There's the end of that. There's the collection of the Dingo dossier that Goscinny and Gottlieb did together. And, of course, the final page, the back cover, also had a comic strip on there, which I have no idea what that's about, but it appeared quite often on the back cover. So that is Pilote Journal. That is the magazine. Overall, I hope you've enjoyed this little tour through there. I've got other magazines to show you, and I will in the weeks ahead. Plus, we'll take a look at how all these books got collected in album format and other ways. So keep an eye out. Subscribe to this channel. Do a big thumbs up. Like something. Whatever you're all supposed to do with Asterix. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you again real soon.